Welcome. My name is Hallie Harrisberg. I'm the director of Michael Rosenfeld Gallery. It's a pleasure to welcome you this afternoon and to have Martha Bergman with us to talk to us, inform us a little bit about the spectrum. A number of years ago, I met Martha looking at another artist's work, and who that artist is and was is really not important, because what was memorable was all that I learned from Martha about color. And it helped me to see not just art, but the world in a very, very different way. And at the end of that conversation, I said, I need to have you come to the gallery at some point, sometime, and give a talk about color and all that Martha has learned over the years in the paint industry, but also as an artist herself. And so when Martha told me that she would be in New York, it was a great coincidence that our Alfonso Ossorio exhibition devoted to his congregations was to be on view. This is the gallery's 12th exhibition for Alfonso Ossorio. There is no other artist that we have devoted so much of our career to. We have highlighted every aspect of his work over the years, and I can honestly say that for both Michael and for me, he is one of our absolute favorite artists, and I think a true artist that evolved from decade to decade, contributing significantly to the history of art. Martha is not an expert on Alfonso Ossorio, but is an enthusiast. And I think that what you have to share with us will help us to see not only Alfonso's work differently, but everything else that our eyes feast on daily. So with that, it is a lecture, but more a conversation. So Martha will welcome your thoughts and questions throughout. So we want active participants today. So enjoy, and then afterwards, please join us for a reception and enjoy the art. And Martha, and thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the gracious introduction, and thank you all for joining me. As Hallie said, I prefer conversation to lecture, and I believe that there are people in the room who have so much to offer as far as your questions and comments. I do work off a piece of paper, so you can't trip me up. Anybody who'd like to comment, anybody who'd like to say, what does that mean? Please do so. It's the greatest part of doing this is talking with all of you. So, and as also in the introduction, I'm not an expert in Alfonso Ossorio, but I have never in 50 years of looking at art seen anything this radical. And the reason it's radical is the materials are all brand new. He assembled a group of materials together that have never been used in 100,000 years. He is using brand new colors that were invented between 1945 and 1960. All that you're looking at is brand new. However, his inspiration for doing the work, I feel, is probably gives more in relationship with the Jerusalem show that's up at the Metropolitan right now. So I would recommend anyone who likes this work to go look at the Jerusalem show, because these are in so many ways reliquaries. They are holders of cosmic energy, which is the point, is to contain cosmic energy. So as radical as these look, each one seems to begin with what's called the Vesica Piscis. And this is the floor plan of a medieval cathedral. This is the nave, this is the altar, this is the congregation. And the use of the word congregation was actually my clue to go to the Vesica. Also the fact that consistently through this show, he is using the eye as both a symbol and a metaphor. The Vesica is the eye of God. It is the seed of light. It is the mandorla. It is all of the basis for medieval art, which is the mandorla shape. And so I put it this way for space, but it can be used any way. But as you look through the Jerusalem show, Oftentimes you only see the mandorla, but both circles have to be drawn by the artist, because this is the eye of Horus, and it opens cosmic energy. So the point of starting a design with a vesica is to open cosmic energy. And that to me is, now why do I say that? Because he has a degree in medieval art from Harvard. Well, that's a big tip-off if he already started his career with an interest in that. Also, he was a Roman Catholic who was raised pre-Vatican II. So this mythology is absolutely in his DNA. This is as deep an inspiration as an artist can have. So those two factors sent me on this quest. And so, but I think the vesica is the key to looking at the art and looking at the spirals, which is a vesica, the eyeballs, the shell shapes, and as you're looking at them, this isn't like Stuart Davis or Jackson Pollock, where the point of view is evenly distributed over the visual plane. These have a place that they start. And as you look at them and you say to yourself, well, where is the artist beginning? You will see that he is beginning with the mandorla form. And that's what makes them very, very much traditional art. So we are looking at some of the oldest symbols and metaphors in art. And as I say, when you see the reliquaries at the Jerusalem show, you go, oh, that makes sense. These contain cosmic energy. He means these to be power objects. So that's why I want to start my comments with saying that. Now, so alchemy, as practiced in Western Europe, has two purposes. The transmutation of metal, which is what the Greek word, alchemy is an Arab word based on a Greek word, which means transmutation of metals. And so he is working with transmutating distressed bits of a high-style life into a brand new organization. So he is taking base material and he is transmuting it into art. That was the work of the medieval alchemist. And the second thing I think is important about the idea of alchemy is that some artists really do open a door for us. And some just describe the world, but some artists, like this artist, he's opening another dimension for us. And he said, to make a good abstract picture, you have to have a personality. You have to have something to abstract and something to express. He's abstracting the medieval, and he is expressing his connection with the divine. And I think we can all feel it. I think we can all see it. And the beauty of it is we don't have to say anything about it. The artist is doing all of the work for us, which was the way art worked until the 20th century. So he's a throwback. And it's hard to look at all of these congregations and go, this is a throwback? Yes. This is the most traditional art I have seen in years. And so art either, we were talking earlier, art either begins with a process of going from lightness to darkness or darkness to lightness. And the artist chooses that, and they choose that with the absolute first, with absolutely the first layer they put down. Ossorio has chosen to go from darkness to lightness, which is again an alchemical system. Because God created the earth, God created, beginning with separating lightness and darkness. But darkness is transmutation of the soul. The low soul, the sinner to the saint. That the process is bringing up from the deepest levels of human being to the brightest levels of human being. And the metaphor for all alchemical processes is the metal lead. Now, lead is very special. It is ductile, it is malleable, and you can just dig it up out of the ground. And it is everywhere. Lead is, when you think the eyes of the Egyptians, the eye of Horus is a perfect example. That is a smear of a metal called galena. And galena is a mixed metal that includes mostly lead, which is why it looks so black. But when lead is bound with other minerals, especially a sulfide, it is non-toxic. So until we started refining lead, it was commonly used, and it was the metaphor for the transmutation, because if you saturate reeds with uric acid or with vinegar and coat black lead with it, and you put it in the ground, it grows a white bloom on top of it. And that white bloom is white lead pigment. You just scrape it off and you have ready to go pigment. So lead is the metaphor for the transmutation of materials, and it is darkness to lightness. So all alchemical processes begin by finding a way to take lead and turn it into gold, and you go through 4-color process. First of all, you separate darkness and lightness, metaphor of the white blooms on the black. And then you've got the light of the sun, which is represented with yellow or with gold. Gold is very, very special. Gold is the only metal inside the human visual spectrum that oscillates a frequency inside the human visual spectrum. All metals have color. We just can't see them. And so gold is special because as you look on, there is no other metal that has a color. And it's golden, it's the color of sunlight, it's the color of illumination, it's the color of, you look at the magnificent illuminated manuscripts with the gold beads all over them. It was calling illumination down. And then red is the top one because you fire the gold. And when you fire the gold, then you make a rosy gold, and that's considered the philosopher's stone. So he is predominantly using the 4 colors of black and white and yellow and red. And there is quite a bit of attention in his work to the way he uses gold. And I think that as you look at the distressed beads, and you know, my dear sweet mama just loved her Majorca. There are Majorca beads all through this. I mean, he used, this is jewelry. This is wall jewelry that he was making. But he called them distressed bits. But again, he's transmuting to a higher level of reality. And in the alchemical color theory, it's important to know that in the Garden of Eden, there were 2 trees. So first is the tree of goodness and badness, that is darkness and light. That's the tree of darkness and light. There's no evil in this system. There's this pre-evil, because we all know in here half a life is bad, half a life is good. And this tree is the darkness and light. The other tree is the tree of immortality. And that's where he's immortal. He has created immortality. These will be in the world as long as human beings are in the world. These will be treasured. This is his immortality. He made it. How many artists make it? He made it. And so that's why I think that we're talking about alchemy here, and we're talking about the transmutation. Now he, of course, left us a lot of hints too. One of the things that's different between Ossorio and, say, Jackson Pollock. Jackson Pollock, they want to talk about it. And I don't know if you all know the artist Emily Mason. I was talking with her about it. She says, oh, those abstract boys, because they were so worried about using color. They were so worried about they might reveal something psychological about themselves. He would never talk about his work. He didn't want anybody, and you know, he was the only one that was in psychoanalysis, but he would never, ever, ever cop to that. And of course, this is not the problem we have with Ossorio, but the idea of revealing yourself is, and so he said here that the idea is to take the most ordinary things and make them extraordinary. I want to show the richness of even the most disagreeable bits of life. So he gave us lots of clues. They're titled, they're well titled. He is well documented. He was a wonderful speaker. There are beautiful long interviews with him. And so he is somebody who wanted us in his artwork He wanted us to be part of what he does. And so now there are 3 steps for an alchemical process. The first one is the artist has to identify what needs to be transformed. So you go around the Hamptons, and you're in the thrift shops, and you're in the Goodwill, or whatever they have in the Hamptons, and picking up. It took him 8 months to assemble the materials for just a few of these, because he made them over a series of 5 or 6 years. But he would go and gather and gather, and there's a beautiful picture of a studio, but there are other beautiful pictures online where you can see that he was arranging things very, very carefully. So the second thing about the alchemy is you need a vessel. You need a vessel to put your magic in order to transmute it. Well, it's interesting that he has chosen these shapes and sizes, but each one of these that you're looking at, if you saw that flat, these are his vessels. These are the magical, you see those great alchemical pictures of all of the condensation and evaporation and dispersion. Well, he's doing that on his tabletop because each one of these is these are holding precious objects. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is, artists must open the Vesica. He must allow cosmic energy to come through. And that's what I think this artist has done. He has opened the Vesica. And as you look at the eyes, you look at the shapes, you look at what he's doing, he's bringing you in. He wants you to look in those eyes. He wants you to experience the circular nature of life, and he wants you to be lifted up. And that is the reason that the reliquaries, and of course it's a Muslim, Jewish, and Christian show. So we're looking at reliquaries of one kind or another from 3 cultures. And this is his interpretation of holding something precious. So that's how I come to understanding this in terms of alchemy. So just back to the biography. He's a water media guy. His work was primarily in watercolor, wax resist, even his famous Angry Jesus, his beautiful chapel in the Philippines, that's a form of water media. And he sought out the top experts in the field. Ralph Mayer was a technical advisor, helped him put together the body materials for the chapel. And at that time, in the 50s, if you weren't painting in oils, you weren't an artist. You know, that prejudice is gone. But if you weren't a serious painter if you weren't painting in oils. And because he was all water media. All of his work previously was water media. And so but he's hanging out with all these artists, and he's showing every year, every other year, his own work. And he would hear comments like this. I've heard this comment for many, many years. Well, if you painted in oils, it'd be worth a whole lot more. If you would just do this in oils, you could sell more of them. It's not significant if it won't last if it's not oils. There's all of this argument. Well, so he tried it. And he has some interesting things to say about oils. Mostly, he didn't like the texture. He didn't like the feel in the hand, which is the reason artists choose the media. You choose the media that fits the hand. But if you fit the hand with the media that's not popular, then what do? Well, you try your technique in another media. So he immediately started sticking stuff in his oil paintings because he didn't like them. He didn't like what he was doing, and so he started sticking stuff in it. He had experienced film failure. The paintings collapsed because oil is viscous. There's no doubt about it, and we've all seen very thick paintings. But you start putting shells and eyes and beads in oil painting, it's not structural. It's not intended to do that. It'll hold glitter, but it's not going to hold stones. And so he experienced film failure almost from the beginning. However, he got the idea. And some of them, this one here and a few close to the door, particularly look like oils. But I think he was making it look like oils by overloading the binder with sand. And they're completely stable. They're completely stable. But you can see that it wasn't, and when he got into here, he started to snap. And so, of course, he knew what he wanted to do. He was going to transmit distressed bits into higher treasure, which these are treasure. He was going to put them in a vessel and create something that comes off the wall. 15 years before anybody thought of it. He was doing Rauschenberg got his idea from him. Rauschenberg is completely derivative after seeing this work. And he had the soul for it. He was a scholar in medieval art. He was a Roman Catholic. He was devout. He was struggling with his faith. He was struggling with other issues in his life that conflicted with his Roman Christianity. And he said, okay, I'm doing it. How? So he went to the most important producers of industrial materials at the time. Rowan and Haas was a German manufacturer. They invented the Rollex binder for acrylic paints, water-based acrylic paint. They invented all of the Rollex binders. So he went to the Germans and he said, I need something that will hold. Any idea what these weigh? How much? Give me a ballpark on what do you think the weight of these is? Well, a weight of one of them, like 20 pounds, 50 pounds? Ballpark, anybody? I would think some of these weigh a good 20 pounds. Yeah, close, yeah. Well, the material that was available at the time was not going to be able to hold this weight. He found two amazing adhesives, industrial adhesives. And one of them is still available, and it's still available from Rowan and Haas, and it's a paralloid adhesive. So what he was able to do was design a piece, and he did it with making a drawing, making a rough layout with the materials. He disassembled it on the side, and then he had these brand new spray adhesives. And these adhesives were able, the adhesive is able to hold this. Now it has sunk some, but in 50 years, maybe that much, these are powerful, powerful adhesives. And I think that they were designed industrially to hold machines together. And the other thing that he borrowed immediately from industry were very, very specific varnishes, which is why these have an overall sheen. He didn't necessarily varnish the top, he varnished as he went. And then he poured paint inside of these, with syringes. He used syringes, he used turkey basters, he used anything that would deliver a ribbon of paint, all water-based. Now in New York, Lenny Becour and Sam Golden were making the very first water-based acrylics for artists. They were available, but they weren't available in many colors. Which is why by choosing a 4-color alchemical system, didn't need a lot of color. And didn't need a lot of different colors. And so he had one red, one yellow, and then green, blue are highlights, no violet. So it's not a full spectrum, and he then could assemble these, and these industrial varnishes, I don't know, I think they look fantastic. But they were designed to hold machines together forever. This is forever. So these are very, very solid. Now he had a definite color theory, definitely something to communicate, definitely novelty. He had no reason for the marketplace. He didn't need any money. He's referred to as a painter and a dilettante in his obituary. And he didn't need to pay. He was his own patron. So what he was doing was for himself, essentially. That, of course, is, I would think, maybe an example of another artist like that's Raphael. There aren't very many artists through the history of art who have had unlimited resources. Raphael painted with medicinal clays, things that were used only for medicine, most expensive ingredients in the world. He wanted them, Pope wrote a check. And so the fact that it's like this is his freedom. He was free. And he was free the way artists can't even imagine. So what we're looking at is innovative art that is radical to the root. Everything about these is brand new. Brand new materials, brand new colors, brand new distressed bits. Everything is brand new. So that is color theory. Everything we've been talking about is color theory. Color theory is each and every artist has an individual color theory. Whether we're talking about Albers or Eaton, or we're talking about Goethe, anybody, that Oswald, anybody who comes to mind, it's a color theory. It has nothing to do with reality or with science. It's a mojo of history and tradition and belief, and it is special. But where's the science in all of this? And my interest is really in the science of all of this. Out of all of the 6 million colors the human eye can see, why did the artist choose these few? The color science comes down into the artist when they select their palette. So all painting is color theory. What is science is the human visual spectrum. Now, the human visual spectrum is the frequency of the oscillating frequencies that the human eye can see in the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, the electromagnetic spectrum, I like to read this because I love it. Electromagnetic radiation is a stream of massless protons traveling in a wave-like pattern at the speed of light. Our eyes are a receiver, like a TV set's a receiver. Same thing. The rods and cones in our eyes only receive from about 380 to about 700 shortwave to long wave out of millions and millions and millions of frequencies in the electromagnetic spectrum. We only see this little bit. Inside these 6 hues are 6 million colors that we can see. That is not what every other species on the planet sees, just what we see. Violet, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red in that order. There's no circle, there's no wheel. Violet and red never mix. Blue and red do not make violet. Red and yellow do not make orange. These are different colors. These are hues. The difference between a hue and a color is a hue is a bandwidth of frequencies. This is a bandwidth. From here to here is a little piece of this bandwidth. This is the big one. So we see very few violet colors. This is short of the ultraviolet. We see very, very little. Who sees ultraviolet? Birds, bees. They see nothing below there. They see nothing, no frequency. The reference on this is the Argentinian neurobiologist Francesco Varela, who did this research and demonstrated that when you look at a magenta rose, a bird or a bee does not see that. They see oscillating frequencies that tell them how to pollinate. They see a landing strip. They see a way in to the pollination. The plant doesn't need us for that. The plant needs us to disseminate the seeds. So what we see is completely different than what they see because they do a different function. Now, below us are the snakes and the reptiles, and they see infrared. And why do they see infrared? Infrared is just a silvery light. As we know, it's all kind of a silvery light. You've seen infrared photography. Sometimes at twilight, as the colors are fading, you can see a little vibration. It's emitted light. They only need the light for warmth. So they need to see emitted light to know which rock has heat on it. So how can I curl myself around a rock if I can't see the heat? So they can see emitted light, and that's the heat. So they see below us. Inside of here, we do not see all of these equally. Very, very few violet, mostly red. All mammalian skin is orange. So orange is absolutely key for us to see. But what matters to human beings is this space between the edge of blue down to the center of yellow. And because color vision is the very top of human survival skills. If we didn't have our color vision, we would die. Because once we stood up off the savannah and looked forward, we could no longer smell water. The only way we can find water is to see the color green. Wherever there is green, we can find water. And when we can see a red apple in a green tree, we can find food too. But mostly, we have to find water. And so green is as much as 40% of our vision, just the colors of green. We can see subtleties in the green hue that if you just go into the country and you look around, you can see so many different colors of green because we have to see it. We have to see it. The others, not so much. We have to see red because we have to find out what's ripe. We have to see that. And if we don't, you know, you can't see a green apple in a green tree because the apple's not ready for us. The apple's not ready for us because our work is dissemination of seeds. So all of this is a mechanism for survival. Now, the other survival skill that's always interesting to me is the bad mood. A bad mood is a human survival skill because you don't have to remember what's right. You just have to remember what's wrong so you don't do it again. And almost all bad mood comes from doing something wrong. So the way when we start thinking about how we stay alive, it is very, very deep in us. And so the way the eye works, again, the vesica is what we're going to do, but I'm going to change the vesica slightly because the eye looks like a vesica. The eye is an orb, as we know, and it has a lens on it. That's like a half a vesica. So this is our lens, and back here we have rods and cones. Well, rods look like rods and cones look like cones, and that's why they're called rods and cones. Now, the cone is color, and it's stacks of actual particles, pigments. A pigment is a substance that is not dissolvable in its binder, and we have pigments in our eyes that hold an electrical charge. And that's how we see oscillating frequencies. So color, one photon of light initiates the whole color spectrum. We have 120 million of these and 20 millions of these because these are new. These are new for human beings. This is what all mammals have cones, rods. We're the only ones that have both. And the way this works is rods and cones are embedded in the retina like spark plugs in an engine. And they're tied directly to our neural system. Now, we have 120 million rods because the rods are lightness and darkness. It's much, you know, even by twilight, color disappears. Our vision doesn't disappear, but color does. You really can't see color at twilight or at the end of the day because you have to have a maximum amount of sunlight to set up the oscillating frequencies. So as the light fades, the oscillation of our eyes fade too. So we can only see the darkness and the light. But the rods and the cones embedded in there allow us to differentiate these 6 hues. So the important part, I think, of understanding all of this is that this is so intrinsic to being human. We never ever, you know, I think it's less than 2% of people have no color at all. It is almost a system that rarely goes wrong. But even people who have, quote, color blindness, they don't necessarily have blindness. What they have is they have a little dead spot in the retina. There's a little dead spot where they don't have, either they were born without them or they were damaged. But I'm trying to think if I've ever met anybody who had no color vision. It's so rare. We can't lose our eyes because then we can't find water. And so that is the function of the eye. So what happened in 1661? All of this, artists have known this. In fact, you go and look at the books and the color theory, the color science that I'm going to describe is in the Egyptians were using this color system. If we had artwork from the Nubian people, people in Mesopotamia, people in Anatolia and Syria, all of them were using the same color system. But what happened is that in 1661, Newton was not interested in color. He was interested in the stars. He wanted to be an astronomer. He was at Cambridge. They closed the school for 2 years because every time the plague came back, they had to close for 2 years because it took 2 years for the bubonic plague to work its way, the infection to work its way through the population. So things were just closed. So he was home in the country. Nobody could grind his lenses. And so he was going to try it himself. So he misground, this kind of sounds like a word thing, misground the lens. So instead of getting that angle, he got this angle and saw the rainbow. Nobody can do this. I mean, I've had artists for years say, well, gee, I've got crystals and I've done this and I've done that, but it doesn't look like a rainbow to me. It's a very specific angle and we can't see it naturally. But he found it accidentally. He was so uninterested in this, he did not publish this research until 1701. It was of no interest to him. And I just want to make one little comment regarding this system. As you see, the color science has no value, no relative darkness and lightness. That was Gerda's quarrel with Newton. How can you have art? How can you have anything without value, without lightness and darkness? And so this system is all based on transmitted light. Just like the TV, just like the camera, anything digital is transmitted light. So what transmitted light is, the waves are moving right through us. The wave is coming into my eyes and just keep on going. You stand behind me, you see it. You stand behind me, you see it. But you don't stand behind me, you don't see it. Well, I'm a receiver. We're all receivers. And this is Newton's radical thought. This is the beginning of the digital revolution. It took 400 years. For 99,400 years before that, we only knew about reflected light, which is the light hits the surface and bounces back to our eye. So the color is caused by what comes back to our eyes. It's not transmitted, it's bounced off. Every single surface in this room is reflected light. We're seeing the light come off the walls, we're seeing the light come off the artifacts, I'm seeing the light come off this beautiful Prussian blue shirt, the light's coming off of your red. Nothing is broadcast, it's just being reflected. This is the stuff of art. It's reflected light. So the light comes in and the violet, the blue, the yellow, the orange, and the red are absorbed, and only the green light bounces back. So that's it. And then we have our serpents and our reptiles, and that's called emitted light. I'm going to bring emitted light to your attention because it is now, for the first time, the radical change we've seen in art is fluorescence and luminescence, fluorescent colors. And everybody needs to be understanding that through these 400 years, 3/4 of the colors that were invented have faded away. There are only 25% of the colors that were invented after 1700 that are still light stable enough for us to see. The reason we can see the colors in the books is the books never had any light on them. You know, the books are closed. So you open a book and those colors were all the colors that were on the paintings. They're just faded. Now, emitted light is not light stable yet. And if you look on the packaging of any brand, good artist brand, that is making fluorescence, not light stable. It's very prominent. But artists, I went into a gallery close by, the entire show was fluorescence. Ask, because they're not light stable. And they won't be light stable until the scientists have perfected the pigments. Because the way these work is that the fluorescents hold a charge. Just like the stone holds a charge from the sun, right after the sun goes down, you put your hand on the stone and you can feel the heat. Well, fluorescents have light, no heat. So they charge up these particles in the laboratory, and they release light only so long, and then they fade. So this is new territory for artists, and the reason this is new territory for artists is, the human quest is for brighter colors. We have for 100,000 years tried to find a way to make things brighter. Over and over and over again, how to make colors brighter. And so up until the invention of fluorescence, the only way to make colors brighter was to use the concept of simultaneous contrast. Anybody who went to the Museum of Modern Art show, which was the beginning of abstraction, 1911, that is what the last line of the beautiful notes that were printed on the wall said. The artists were the first group of artists to consciously employ simultaneous contrast. They're not the first artists to use it. They're the first artists to manipulate it. So what does that mean? Full retinal activity. If you stare at a solid red color until your eyes are tired, and then you look at a white piece of paper, you will see green. Because red is a complement of green. Violet is a complement of yellow. And blue is a complement of orange. And when these two colors, when you do this exercise, you create full retinal activity, which means every single one of your color guns is firing. That makes the brightest possible colors. The more electromagnetic radiation we are experiencing, the brighter colors look. And I saw it in some of those beautiful illuminated manuscripts yesterday. They were using green and red. Green and red is by far the most common. And I think that the reason that this is important is that the only way to make colors brighter is to put them in this order. So you put red next to green, the red pops. You put violet next to yellow, the yellow pops. You put blue next to orange, the orange pops. So if you want to draw attention to some part of your painting, you have to make it brighter. Because how are you going to trick the eye? You have to make it brighter. So this is important, and I'm going to tell you one story about why this is so important. Picasso, this was from the Lerner collection, the Lauder collection show at the Met. Again, just in the catalog. Picasso went to his dealer and said, my paintings aren't selling. What was selling were the fauves. They were selling. The fauve, every single painting made by the fauve sold. Human quest is for brighter colors. People were painting their walls white. They wanted to bring brightness into their environment. They wanted a bright painting. So they didn't want to go look at line art. Color and line split in 1911. Picasso followed the line. Derain and the other fauves followed Matisse is the exception. He's not exactly in it. They followed just maximum brightness, maximum brightness. And they were selling, and so the dealer said, put some color in them. So he took them back, and you will notice his paintings only are red and green. And what I learned years ago from talking with artists, I was a materials manufacturer for many years, is that all artists have a complementary pair bias. And I'm giving you this for your entertainment. Because you go to a painting show, and you will see all artists have a bias. You will see that when they want to get your attention, they're using blue and orange. When they want to get your attention, they're using red and green. This is the least common. Violet and yellow is very rare. It's not natural to most people. Most people aren't comfortable with this. Most artists aren't comfortable. So this is just fun to realize that you can go in and Ossorio definitely has a red-green bias, and it's the most common. And the reason it's the most common is we're looking for that red apple in the green tree. It's so natural for us. But these other ones are very unusual. I have a blue-orange bias that was so bad, I had to consciously work work out of it. I noticed that I had a blue and orange rug. You know, I looked around, oh my gosh, look at those blue and orange paintings. And so everybody has one, and you all do too. And to see what attracts you, you know, what attracts you. But I think that this is important because there are 6 common notions about color. One of them is that there are no primary colors. There are no primary colors. There are 6 primary hues. There are 6 million colors in 6 primary hues, with 40% of them being in green. So that's one of the most important things. They are always organized in this way, from shortwave, ultraviolet light, to infrared, right just there. And that when they are combined in this way, complementary colors, they make the brightest colors, and the organization of them is the key of modernism. Modern art is based on simultaneous contrast. Almost every painting made since 1920 is made with this in mind. They know this. Because there's no way to make light stable colors any brighter. The only way to do it is to put them together in such a way that they attract your attention. And so the artist is saying, pick the red apple out of my tree. What do they want us to know? And the way they do that is they bring us right in like a flower, right in like a ripe apple. They bring us in. And so understanding that color's no wheel. A wheel is a color theory. Anytime you see a color organization that's not this, it's theory. This is the science of it, and it's just based on the visual. So, all right, at this point, the science stuff, are there any questions or comments? I realize that this is, you know, this is a lot of what I learned, a lot of this making paint and research, but anybody else, I mean, everybody okay with this? Everybody cool? Okay. I don't want to just barrel ahead because, you know, it's enough that, you know. So, okay, now I'm good. All right.
Actually, I do have a question. If you could connect it to the gold and the varnish in terms of how it hits right.
Yes. Well, gold is special. It's the only precious metal we can see.
Except it uses more varnish.
Well, but what he's doing is the purpose of the varnish is to increase the sheen. And when you increase the sheen, well, actually, he's increasing the shine. And when you increase the shine, see, he's got all the light bouncing off the beads in particular. What are you interested? The great white lights of Broadway? Look here. Look here. Look at me. Look where I want you to see. Look at me. Look at me. And so he's bringing you in. Now, shine and sheen are products of lightness and darkness. They're not the product of color. They're the product of brightness. But that gold is so unusual, and it's been valued because, you know, you dig it up out of the earth. You can easily melt it and mold it. It's ductable. You can remelt it. It's easy to carry. It's lightweight. Mostly it's shiny, and it's yellow. And yellow is the color of inspiration because it never, ever tarnishes. Only metal we have that doesn't tarnish. Platinum, but they didn't have platinum then. So, yes?
Can you actually define simultaneous contrast?
Yes.
I know you talked about it at but how would you define simultaneous contrast?
Simultaneous contrast is the product, is the process of the human visual apparatus that allows us to make colors brighter, literally. In other words, if the tree wants you to pick the apple, it puts in the red. So that's the principle. But how it's made is again by creating for us that full retinal activity. It's when you stare at the red, solid red, and you look at a white sheet, you will see the color green. And when you see the color green, you have engaged in full retinal activity, which is why this is probably as old a knowledge as people making art, because it's a part of our eyes. It simply wasn't codified and named simultaneous contrast, actually by the great French chemist Chavarral. And what he was hired by the Gobelin tapestries, which had been bought by the French government. But at that time, 1820, 1830, people didn't want to hang tapestries anymore. House paint was developed in 1780, so they had house paint. And the reason house paint was invented was that traditionally the British had built with brick. Most European cultures built with brick. But they had all this cheap yellow pine coming back as ballast from the slave trade. They were, shipping supplies to South Carolina, and they were sending back all this wood. So the British contractors decided, well, let's build with wood. We've got all this wood, but they wanted it to look like brick. So the house paint industry was created. Indian red, somebody mentioned Indian red, I think you did. Indian red was the first commercial pigment ever made. It's a synthetic iron oxide pigment, and it's called Mars Red. And it was named, I always thought it was named Mars Red because it was as powerful as the god of war, but it was actually the name of the manufacturing company in England. And they imported it from India, and it was mined off the coast of India. And that's how it became called Indian red. But when they started painting with house paint, the outside of the color, well, if we can paint the outside of the houses, can we paint the inside? Until the 18th century, there was no interior paint. You built whatever surface you had built with, you covered with a carpet. So they hired Chavarral to make them brighter colors. But you can't make brighter colors. They couldn't make brighter colors until the Industrial Revolution of 1850. Then they could make brighter colors. He didn't have brighter colors. So he said, he did exactly what I think I did. He went to the Vatican and looked at the Raphaels. Every single one of these things I'm talking to you about, Raphael did. If you look, especially at the stanza rooms, if you look at his rooms, and you will see yellow and violet, he had been employing all of these. It's everywhere. I mean, it's just something that we hadn't really, didn't have a name. So Chavarral named it Simultaneous Contrast and codified it. He wrote the book and said, okay, this is how you make the colors. And literally, the tapestry makers, you can see in the changes. You can see them putting yellow thread next to violet thread, green thread next to yellow thread. And so the first time it was employed in industry. And that's how it became, in 1820, simultaneous contrast. And then the French in particularly embraced it, and the Delaunay's in particular when they were teaching the Americans to paint early in Paris. Sorry, long-winded. Anybody else? I mean, now would be a great time. Let's just...
For example of what you're saying, the artist Robert Indiana, when he first did his love composition,
right,
it was with red and blue. And when he added green to the silkscreen, that's when the thing took off.
Popped.
Huh.
It popped.
Yeah.
Blue and red, of course, are symbolic colors, active and passive mind. They're another part of the alchemical system, the active and the passive mind, which is not employed here, but it's certainly employed in that George O'Keeffe picture you showed me. And so, again, that's that color theory of the artist. That's a perfect example because I've seen the blue ones and I've seen the green ones. And in fact, there's a Herrera show up. My cousin is visiting, and we just walked down from the Whitney, and she's got a 5-year-old who sent her a picture of a drawing, and it's yellow and violet, 5 years old. So we're watching him. He's going to be on these walls soon. I mean, that you don't see children working on simultaneous contrast. And one of the Herreras, she's saying, gosh, is that possible? Is that possible? Because she's using a lot of yellow and violet, and it's very difficult for people to use yellow and violet. So come on, talk to me.
Can you say something about Rauschenberg and his relationships also as
Well,
well?
when I walked into this gallery, I realized that Rauschenberg saw these in 1960 and went, I can do that. I did. I just, whoa, yeah. That's how it goes. I mean, you know, that's why artists want to be in New York. Yeah, that fertility. Yes?
You mentioned Rafa's stanzas. Do you think the School of Athens can be referred to the
I have to-
colors?
I have to come to you, sorry.
You mentioned Raphael.
Yes.
Stanza. Do you think the School of Athens can refer to what you just mentioned, the theory of colors? The School of Athens by Raphael?
Oh, of course. Yes, yeah, I do. You know, and I think that's what I'm talking about, the one you just change that little bit of the way you look at it, woo, and you know exactly where the artist is taking you, yeah? Because they're taking us on a visual journey, and we hope we don't have words for it. This is not word-based, and so we hope we go where they want us to go. Even if it's all over, we go where they want to go. Thank you, appreciate that. Anybody else? Come on. Everybody's interested in art. It's time for you to talk. Okay. Is it time for wine? Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.